Okay, Lions, we are back for session number 6. In this session, we're going to be talking about business and tax planning. This is the last session in this series. I want to thank Randy so much for this, but Randy, take it away.
Good to be with you all again, and we have some really good stuff to talk about in this session, and some things that you've probably not considered before or heard before. Take that minute and make sure you're under control and got your pen and paper and some notes, because I want your attention here for the next 20 or 25 minutes. In this session, I want to give you an overview of this business and tax planning. Of course, they're big subjects within the context of us helping you build your Braveheart exit plan. They're very important, and so stay with me here as we go. Our Braveheart exit plan, remember, begins with these 3 questions. When do you want to exit your plan, exit your business? How much do you need from that exit or transition? And to whom do you want to transition? And this question of to whom is going to come into play here in a really big way, because it's going to change the very structure, very strategy of how we approach the exit planning. And remember too, I put the hero on here because I want you to remember that you have to be this guy for your people. You've got to be this guy, the leader, the hero for your family and for your company. You are the leader, you're the visionary, you're the guy that's got to make it happen or it's not going to happen. All right, I want to introduce you to a concept here. If you're going to sell to kids or sell to employees, you're going to actually try to minimize the value of your company. I know that seems a little weird, but stay with me here. So again, if you're selling to kids or selling to employees, the strategy that we're going to work on here is how do we make that company as cheap as possible for the son or the employee to buy. The reason for that, of course, is that our children and employees typically have a lack of something important, and that is cash. So they're not going to step up, and they also likely don't have the ability to go to the bank and borrow enough money to pay you off. So we've got to do this in an internal way. We're going to talk about the ways to minimize the value of the company. It isn't that I want you to get less money in the overall net benefit to you. It's just we're going to rearrange the company and how we get money out in different ways so that you can take advantage of essentially options that will eliminate unnecessary taxes to be paid to the IRS. And in this transition, believe me, your number one enemy in this is the IRS. Because if I'm an employee, let's say, and I'm going to buy the company, if you pay me, let's say $50,000 or $100,000, whatever you're paying me, I've got to pay tax on that money when I get it. That's tax number one. Then if I buy stock from you, you get the money for the stock, then you've got to pay tax on that same money that's left over. Let's say I had 65 cents on the dollar and I use those and I pay towards the stock. Now he's got 65 cents that we started with that is now going to be, when it's paid to him, he's got to pay capital gains or ordinary income, depending on how long he's held that. So he's going to have to pay tax on the stock gains himself. So he's got 2 levels of tax that we've got to try to minimize here. That's the whole point about this. How do we get this started? I like to see what I call a seed. It's either a gift or a bonus that goes to the employee or to the kid. We seed that knowing that this inside sale, and again, this is another part for you, it doesn't typically happen in 3 years. It takes 5 to 10 years, and probably 7 to 10 is more common. An early gift or seed or bonus, if you will, let's assume that it's an S Corp as an example. If we give them some sort of a seed gift or a bonus, they've got a little bit of S Corp stock that when you get distributions, they'll get a little extra that they can then use to pay for the stock with. And part of this is just the idea of rewarding a kid or an employee for even being the one that you're considering to allow them to buy, and also recognizing at some point that if they're that key to you, it's possible and probable that some of the growth of the company had to do with the fact that this key person was involved. So I like to do it because it typically gives them a stake in the ground and lets them know this is real and it's not all display. The second way that we work on getting the transfer accomplished by minimizing, what we're trying to do is minimize the value of the company, is using the power of rent. And that is, many of my clients own the property individually or in an outside LLC or something in which their companies operate. As an example, I bet you 70% of my business owners own the property in which they operate. And so what we do is we will push the power of the rental. We push it as high as we can, because one of the goals here, remember, is to make the net income of the company less, so that, because companies are typically valued on some sort of multiple of EBITDA, which is earnings before income taxes, depreciation, etc. If we're going to use rent to reduce the net income, if you will, then we want to pay as much rent as we can defend before the IRS, and that's one of the ways that will reduce some of the value. Another one, which too often is overlooked, is the idea that many of the business owners actually have intellectual property. So they have got trademarks, or they've got patents or something that they've created over the years, and most of them do those things in their own name. And I discover this fairly often. I'll go back and look and see, and I find that there's a patent or a trademark that's retained in the business owners, and we will use that asset and we will actually license it or rent it to the business, so that the business is burdened with paying for that, which again reduces the income to the business. So we're going to continue to keep trying to find ways to reduce the income. Another way to do that is through pension plans. And I want to spend a little bit of time on pension plans, because especially if the business owner is older, this can be very, very powerful. I like to use pension plans because I use them as a risk management tool. So it actually transfers some of the value of the business out of the business into a pension plan, which can then be invested and diversified into many other stock positions around the world. So I like that. It minimizes risk to my business owner because he doesn't have as much of his net worth tied up in the business. And as you know, we've talked about before, 70 to 90% of our net worth as business owners tends to be tied up in that business. So squeezing off value out of that business as we go along is one of the things that we like to do to minimize the impact of the risk of being in the business to the family. And then finally, the idea here is that these pension plans, if we can burden the company with defined benefit plans, defined benefit payments, then, and you're older, towards the end of your career, the cost of those defined benefit payments can be substantial. We've had them in the past where we've put away $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 per year, and most of the benefit went to the owner towards the end of the career, so that the value of the company is reduced again because earnings are squeezed down. Types of pension plans, I just want to spend just a few moments on that if I could. First kind I want to talk about is a profit sharing. This is where you've got discretion as the employer to make contributions. I like these, actually, and I've used one in my company since I started years ago. Whenever we make decent money, I share that with my employees by making contributions to our profit sharing plan. They get the same percentage I do. So if I'm doing 7%, I put 7% of my salary and 7% of theirs in there. And so I'm pretty generous about that, but I like to take care of my people. Secondly, cash balance plans are defined benefit types of plans. They kind of resemble a defined contribution plan, though. They're more aggressive. They're more expensive to create because of their sort of special design. You can put more money away in these things, and they become relatively popular for really profitable companies, if you will. The last I want to talk about here is a money purchase plan. It operates like a profit sharing plan, but the employer has a set contribution that it has to make every year, regardless of whether or not it makes a profit. And so that idea that you've got to put the money in, it becomes a liability to the company. Sometimes that scares business owners out because they don't like the idea that they have to fund something when the company actually lost money. It's one of the better ways to actually make it a liability to the company, thus reducing profits that are sort of forced to be paid. So it can be, it's a sword that cuts both ways, but again, we're picking the right tools under the right circumstances to make sure things work well for you. Another way to minimize the net income of the company is to pay retirement compensation to the owner. A portion of the employer's compensation is paid at a later date. Deferred comp plans are built around that concept. The other one is to just contractually enter into an agreement with the owner that they are going to be consultants going forward, and we continue their salary as they've been in the same position, even though they're not working on a day-to-day basis anymore. Again, minimizing that value, and at the end of that contract, of course, then we won't be paying anymore, and the value will will all sort of revert to the buyer. I hope you get the concept here that where our goal here is to overall find ways, and these aren't all the ways, some of the good ones, more common ones, to reduce the value of a company for purposes of transferring it at a cheaper tax rate to the employee and or to the children. So the next thing I want to talk about is a third party sale. This is where I don't know the people, they're interested in my business. You know, we hired an M&A firm, we've got a deal law firm we've hired and put in place. We're going to market and we're going to sell basically to the highest bidder. In general, that's what we're looking for here. In reality, sometimes I have business owners that will choose not to do business with the highest bidder because they don't like their corporate culture and they want their people protected. So they'll choose somebody that's actually paying less money so they can protect jobs or protect culture. You know, we want to talk about selling here to a third party and we want the most money possible. So you want to run your company here in such a way that you're selling it, which is different than you're going to run your company in the event that you're going to keep it. You know, you're going to handle that company different ways. You're going to use it for your own benefit in different ways and such. But remember, as we go to the third party market, remember that capital is a coward. I've mentioned this before. So the big thing for you here is that our goal is to maximize value for the owner. But in doing so, that capital is a coward is a really big deal. And it brings me to the point of the fact that you need to develop new eyes and see things a different way. Knowing that capital is a coward, knowing that when we do a third party sale, that we're going to have due diligence. They're going to come in with lawyers and accountants and go through your company, and they're going to be looking for reasons to reduce their offer or not to buy your company as much as they're looking for reasons to buy it. So we've got to make sure that the company is being run well, the books are under control and in shape, the legal side of everything is being run appropriately, and all that's under control. So we do legal audits and such for this kind of thing. So at the end of the day, though, you've got to develop these new eyes. You've got to start looking at your company through the eyes of a buyer instead of the eyes of a seller or the eyes of a customer, which is how we typically look at our businesses.
Hey, Randy, let me bring up one point there. In your book, The Braveheart Exit, I think one of the biggest things I got was whether you're getting ready to sell your business or not, you want to run your business as if you're going to sell it. And it raises everything up. I remember one of the biggest things in there was developing your employees because that's valuable to somebody. You know, so whether you're going to sell it 20 years from now or tomorrow, you know, it's good to do what Randy's saying.
Matter of fact, that leads directly to where we're going next, which has to do with what are the ways to maximize some of the value of the company to a buyer. And we picked 3 to talk about here because we have a limited amount of time in the series, but there are others. And some of those things, obviously, you know, your coaches and your business coaches and such will work on with you. They can add lots of value. We talked about that before in a previous, but we're going to focus on 3 ways today. The first one is that whole concept of management team. That is building a management team, which we call the next level management team. You want to build a management team that is capable of taking your company to the next level. And many times, and I just dealt with a client yesterday who recognizes he's not the guy that should be the CEO. He recognizes what his skill set is, that whole idea of us understanding what your highest and best use is, your unique ability. For many of you, after you get the company started and under control, you're really not an operations guy. You're really not a CEO person. You really should be hiring and starting to transition. And I've got a number of my clients who are at the point where we're starting to consider transitioning to a CEO or a COO. So this is not, you know, denigrating to the owner at any level, that you're not the guy that should be managing the company that way. It's just that the Lord's given us different strengths and weaknesses, and so you need to spend your time on vision and working on the business instead of in the business. And developing your leadership and mentoring your men or your women in the leadership position. So you're just going to slowly change hats here so we can get you into the place where that management team is running the company and you're not, because that will make that company more valuable to somebody else, to other outside buyers. The second thing that we want to talk about is having a diverse customer and supplier base. Now, this is a big deal. I mean, it seems, you know, like it's such a small thing, but I can tell you, if you're in the middle of a buy, or somebody's buying you and you're in the middle of it, and all of a sudden you've got a problem with your supplier is in trouble and you don't have a backup or a second one or a third one or whatever it is, the whole nature of your business is at risk. So the supplier bases, you have to shore those up. And secondly, diverse customers here. The idea that if I'm going to buy a business and it's got 2 or 3 customers that make up 50% of that company, first of all, I'm not sure if I want that company. And secondly, if I do, I'm going to discount my purchase price substantially, because there is a possibility, I know, that if I lose 1 or 2 of those customers, the whole value of my purchase has been dropped in half. And so I'm going, remember I said capital is a coward? I'm going to be worried about that, and I'm going to defend myself in that purchase towards it. The third thing I want to talk about that a company loves to get is consistent and growing revenue streams. It's like gold in the business buying world. The family offices and such, they love to buy companies where they don't have to start over every year with a new business base. You know, it's not, you don't have to sell everybody again all over. You have a long history of loyal customers that are going to come back all the time, all the time, all the time, and you build on that. Or you've got a sticky business model like maybe a SaaS company, a software as a service where they pay ongoing licensing fees every month or every quarter, and you continue just adding to that, and you have a 99% stick rate or something. You know, those businesses are wonderful businesses to buy, and we're not all in those businesses, but to the extent that you can understand that the goal of a buyer is as much as possible to see a consistent and growing revenue stream, you do what you can inside of your business to get your company to that point. All right, next I want to talk about estate planning. We want to spend a few minutes raising, I'll call it, high-level issues. This is estate tax planning. We talked about estate planning before, so this is sort of the level above basic estate planning I want to mention a few things about, just to give you context here. First question is, do you have a taxable estate? Is the value of your estate, including, by the way, life insurance policies that you own and that are in your name, if you own them, then the face of that, or the amount that's paid out at your death, will be included in your estate. So if you've got your assets and life insurance policies you own, if those add up to $5.5 million, you have a taxable estate. You just entered the edge of that. The unified credit, they call it, is an amount that does change and rises over time, but right now it sits right around $5.5 million. And one of the things, by the way, early in our sessions, we talked about business valuation. Some of you don't know if you have a taxable estate. Some of you have it and you're doing nothing about it because you have no idea what your company is worth. But we will find out. The IRS will find out what the company is worth when you die. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why we want those valuations done. This is one of them. One of the ways that we can control whether estate taxes are paid, and the easiest one, is what we call estate splitting. And that's the idea that you can create trust. There's a couple different ways to accomplish it. You can create trust during your lifetime and fund that with assets to your wife and your kids. That's one way you can do it. Separate trust versus joint trust. Let's say that I have a business, it's worth $10 million. I married a woman, I already had the business, it's my business, it's all in mine, and her estate is, $200,000. There is an unlimited marital deduction that can occur if you leave assets to your spouse. You can leave assets to her that would be included in her estate, would be included in trust for her, that would then take what was a taxable amount above that $5.5 million. So at 10 million, you'd have $4.5 million that you'd owe somewhere around 40% on. That's a lot of money. That's $2 million or so that you owe the IRS, even if you have an estate that small. We want to take this estate splitting thing seriously. The other way, of course, is just gifts versus ownership. You can make gifts to your kids. The idea, we have the ability to gift to our children. Both spouses can gift to each kid every year, an annual exclusion gift. Right now it sits around $14,000. So if you're consistently, putting money into your kids' trusts for college and that sort of thing, and teaching them, of course, along the way, as we talked about, you can continue to reduce and keep your estate smaller as you make these gifts, together with doing some planning and trusts and gifts and such. I want to talk about an opportunity this is a strategy that we have used a number of times and saved our clients tens of millions of dollars. This is a really cool thing. Most of you will have never heard of anything like this before, And it isn't that I want to make you experts in it. All I want to do is just drop the concept into your mind so that if you get into this place where your company starts to grow and you realize that that company is, you don't really see an end in sight for its growth, and you're going to end up having estate tax problems as a result of it. We love to get companies that are worth between 5 and 20 million, let's say, and do some type of a squeeze and freeze on. I'm giving you one example. There's lots of other possibilities and tools that we would use, but conceptually, I want you to get this. The goal is to get appreciating assets, and in this case, business interests outside of your estate for estate tax purposes. So the first thing that we need to do is value the company, which is, of course, what we talked about before. We need to know what the company is worth. That'll help us identify where we start. Secondly, we're going to take the value of the company and we're going to apply discounts to it. Discounts for lack of marketability and a minority interest value. So we're going to put, let's say, 45% of the company into a trust for the benefit of your spouse and your children. And then I might have your spouse, who possibly, if she owned part of the company, if not, we might give her some of it first, but she could also create trust for you and your son, you and your children during your lifetime, and such. We get a bunch of value outside of your estate. That's the first thing. We discount those shares, as I was talking about, that lack of marketability discount, that lack of control, because as a minority interest holder, if we're going to transfer 40% of something, that is worth less typically than if I have 100% of it as a percentage, you see. Because control, once I get control of the company, those shares to me and to the IRS are worth more money than shares that can't control the company. And then our intent then is to transfer shares into that irrevocable trust, and the shares then will appreciate estate tax free from that point forward. And I can tell you, we literally have saved tens of millions of dollars for families with this strategy for companies that were growing, unbelievably. So back to my point here earlier, and I want to close kind of with this conceptually. Don't underestimate the value of professionals. They play a really big part in your success, and the more your company grows, the more important they are to you and your family. And then very last here, I just want to go back to the concept again of making sure that you consider who should be running the team. Just like sometimes I say, maybe you shouldn't be the CEO, maybe the company's grown past you, so maybe you shouldn't be running the team, because all these people, as we talked about before in one of the earlier sessions, we talked about how important each of these people are, but knowing when to bring them in and how to direct them and what they should be doing and whether they're qualified and they're the right people in the right seat and the right, on the bus for you, all of those things come into play. So we would encourage you to think hard about whether or not you should be running that or whether you should find somebody to help run that team for you.
Super, Randy. Thank you so much again. And another great session there. See you next time.